Welcome to this month's ISP A to Z speaker series, where we connect parents with leading experts to explore future careers and give you tools to have meaningful conversations with your children about the opportunities that are available for them in the future. I'm Gwaurtag. I'm ISP's Head of Future Pathways, and today I'm very excited to be joined by Dr. Tyrone Lavery. He's a lecturer in native vertebrate biology at one of the most prominent Australian universities, the University of Melbourne. His work takes him from the field to museum collections to the lab, and he also travels the world with his role. He will talk us through how your child can explore the field of zoology and look at the emerging fields and also the essential skills that children will need to thrive in zoology-related careers in the future. So, Dr. Lavery, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
You are most welcome. And tell me, how are things in Melbourne today?
Great. Everything's good here in Melbourne. We're heading into winter here in Australia, so it's cooling down. This week was quite cold, but still sunny days out there, so it's still nice.
Fantastic. And I heard it's wombat season at the moment. Is that correct?
It is here in Melbourne. According to the Indigenous seasonal calendar, we call it wombat season, and that's the time of year when wombats sit out the front of their burrows and sun themselves, get nice and warm in the mornings.
Oh, and I don't blame them. That sounds fantastic. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We do really appreciate your time. I believe you're going to be delivering a presentation for us about the careers available in zoology and how it'll merge in the future as well. So thank you very much. And please go ahead with your presentation.
We're here at the University of Melbourne. We're on Wurundjeri Indigenous land, so we always acknowledge that we work here on Indigenous land and acknowledge all the elders of Wurundjeri people. Before I start, I'm a lecturer in native vertebrate biology here at the University of Melbourne in the School of Biosciences, and yet as you said, my research primarily focuses on mammals. And I am a zoologist. I study zoology, and so I thought probably the best thing I could do would be to start by kind of giving a bit of a background of my story and telling you about all of that stuff before I get into the nuts and bolts of zoology, because I feel it is a little bit biased. I'm someone that since I was a small child, I had a severe case of biophilia, which means that I'm someone that loves nature and loves wildlife and animals. As a kid, I was really, even as a tiny kid, really interested in getting outdoors and seeing different animals and things. And so if you ask my parents, they'd probably tell you that I was always going to be someone who worked in zoology. And I consider myself lucky because I kind of knew my path, and I think for the bulk of people, that's probably not the case. Most people really have to find their way with what careers they'd like to take on. And besides liking outdoor stuff, I'm someone that loves puzzles and asking questions and working out the answers to those questions, and also just discovering and learning new things. And so I did a Bachelor of Science in Zoology and Ecology at university after I finished year 12. I then went and did honours, which is a year where we study a research project, then worked as an environmental consultant. I then did my PhD, again in zoology and ecology, and then went on to work in museums as a postdoctoral researcher, and now I'm at the University of Melbourne as an academic. I'm a zoologist that studies mammals. So work in taxonomy and systematics, which is working out how species are related and what different species, naming and describing different species. And I use genetic data and museum specimens for that. Also, I'm very interested in how animals live and interact with their environment, which we call ecology. And I also do a lot of conservation work and monitoring, working out for threatened species in particular, whether their populations are going up or going down, and how we need to look after our wildlife. When I guess anytime that I tell people I'm a zoologist, their immediate reaction is that I work in a zoo, which is not the case. Zoology is the scientific study of animals, their biology, behavior, evolution, and the ecosystems they live in. Zoologists can work in zoos, but not all people who work in zoos are zoologists. And I would say most zoologists don't work in zoos. We undertake a lot of different roles in governments or in private groups or universities or museums. There's a lot of sub-branches or disciplines under zoology. There are a lot that focus on specific groups of animals. I said I'm a mammologist. That's someone who studies mammals in particular. There's also ornithologists who study birds, herpetologists that study reptiles and amphibians, ichthyologists work on fish, entomologists study insects, and then there's a whole range of other lesser known ones that focus on specific groups of animals. Then there's kind of sub-disciplines or different focuses, thinking about how animals are distributed, or looking at fossils and subfossils, understanding how animals develop and reproduce, what their shapes are, as I said about taxonomy, classifying and naming species, and looking at molecular biology and other things like that. So there's a whole range of different tasks that are undertaken by zoologists. I'd say some of the more traditional roles are wildlife biologists that work to record data in the field, with groups like government agencies, where we have people that are documenting and working out how to best conserve and look after our species, our animals. And a lot of people also work in research capacity, so universities or museums. And then there's also some very practical applications as well. A lot of work in, I would say the biggest employer of people who study zoology would be environmental consultancies, and they're all about trying to understand the impacts of different things happening on animals. So, for example, if you'd like to build a new area for houses, then environmental consultants or zoologists will go to that area and work out what animals live there and what needs to be done to protect and manage those animals that live there. Yep, there's a lot of, as I said, environmental consulting. Some other big employers or places that zoologists find work or things that they do are in genetics. More and more that's becoming a big one, in trying to understand how animals are related or how we best manage them or conserve them. Conservation biology is a big one. In Australia, we have a lot of organisations where their aims and their work is all about looking after the environment. We have some big ones called the Australian Wildlife Conservancy here in Australia, and they're basically privately owned groups that look after wildlife and conserve wildlife. And then more and more science communication is a big one as well. Nature documentaries and journalism talking about wildlife and animals and their threats and how to look after them are all big, increasingly big. There's a lot of roles in that type of work, and also online, of course, making blogs and small videos and social media and those types of things. If I were to think about emerging roles, some of the big things that are coming through are, I've got a couple of images up in the top there. As a mammologist, I would have once gone out and had to collect all my data using traps, capturing animals to record what's there and what they're doing. But more and more, we're using these other new technologies that collect lots and lots of data. And I've got pictures there. A acoustic recorder that records sound on the left-hand side there, and a camera trap on the bottom right there, and that records pictures of animals. So we just put that camera in the forest, and when an animal walks in front of it, that camera will automatically take photos of that animal, and we can get lots and lots and lots of images and data on those animals. So we need more and more, we need people who can work with lots of data. So if you're not necessarily interested in outdoors and nature, but you are interested in looking at big data sets, and you're interested in maths, and your children love maths, then I think that's a big area that is becoming available for work in zoology. Also getting data from remote sensing, satellite images, aerial photography, GIS information systems. That's another big area where people are becoming heavily involved. Climate change research is another one, understanding how species adapt to climate change, and also planning to help species adapt so that we can make sure that as our Earth is warming, that we can make sure animals continue to survive and live happily. Urban wildlife specialists are another big one, because more and more we're realizing that there is a lot of value in cities, that there's some really special wildlife that live in our cities, and they need unique responses to look after them. And then what we call cross-disciplinary work, combining traditional zoology with other new emerging things, especially new technology that I mentioned about the camera traps and the acoustic devices. And science communication again. In terms of supporting careers in zoology, I think back to myself again, and the people that really helped me as a young person to follow what I was really interested in. And they were mostly my family members, my mother and father and my grandfather, and they really encouraged my interests and encouraged my exploration, going on walks, and also fostering my curiosity. So understanding or asking questions about nature and trying to find the answers to those questions. Now there's a lot of opportunities to actually become involved in research that's going on, or information about wildlife and in zoology, because of citizen science programs. So if your child would like to record data or help with research projects, there's lots of opportunities to do that, to get online and look through camera trap images or record other data on there. You can use your smartphone to record a lot of data on which animals are out there and where they are at the moment. That's really, really helpful for a lot of projects. So I'd encourage you to look into that stuff as well. And then supporting academic paths, of course, is a big one. Biology, geography, and maths are all the big subjects that are important for zoology and heading into zoology. I think, yeah, I think again back to when I was a young person and I was able to get out there into the natural environment. That's not always possible for everyone, and access to the natural world is not equal across the world and across demographics and different people. So in cases where it's not possible to necessarily get out there into national parks or pursue that interest in wildlife, there are some alternatives. And I certainly know people who've grown up in New York or places like that, and they've gone on to careers in zoology through pursuing their interests in other ways, things like museum collections, watching nature documentaries. I used to love nature documentaries, David Attenborough, etc., when I was a kid, and that I think really fostered my interest as well. And also there's, as I mentioned earlier, increasingly we're understanding that urban biodiversity, the things that live in our cities are really important, and there's a really fascinating group of animals that live in our cities worldwide. And so there's opportunities there to connect with nature and foster your interest in zoology that way by looking at what lives in our cities. If you're interested in talking to your children about zoology, I wouldn't be worried if you're not a scientist yourself. You don't have to be a scientist. Again, I said that most of the people that influenced me as a kid and helped me get into zoology were my parents and my grandfather, and they were by no means trained in science. They worked in other careers. So don't let that worry you if you're not a scientist yourself. It's just about going on that journey with your children and being curious yourself, asking questions about what's happening in nature. What's this animal? What's it doing? Why is it living here? Those types of questions are really that's really what I think can help encourage and foster that interest in zoology. And okay, in summary, I'd say I've mentioned a lot about loving nature, and certainly zoology is suited to people who love nature and love being outdoors and love wildlife. And so if your child is that way inclined, then I'd say zoology is certainly a great career for them to think about, but it's not something that's limited only to people who love nature. There's a lot of other opportunities in zoology for mathematicians, for people looking at and analysing data, for science communicators, people who are interested in social media and all those types of things. Zoology has opportunities. There's also great opportunities to combine traditional studies with new things, new technology, exciting data analysis. And I found it to be a really rewarding and exciting career because I've been able to link those things, my love of nature with exciting technology, and basically asking questions and answering those questions has been something that I've really loved.
Listen, thank you, Dr. Tyrone. This has been a fantastic presentation. Thank you for the details and the guidance that you've provided for our parents. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
So visit ISP's Future Pathway programme online to explore resources and opportunities that can empower your child to thrive in a future shaped by innovation and possibility. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of the ISP A to Z speaker series. Thank you.